He looked like the perfect husband. Successful, respected, trusted by everyone around him. But police say, behind the smile was a man secretly planning murder. A checklist, not for groceries, not for work. A murder checklist. Research, surveillance, weapon, escape plan. Every step carefully written down. Then one night in New Orleans, his wife, Liz Marinello, was ambushed outside her therapist's office. At first, Vince acted devastated, but detectives uncovered something chilling. Digital evidence destroyed his alibi. Rare ammunition linked him to the crime. And the checklist changed everything. How did a famous broadcaster become one of Louisiana's most shocking killers? And what made investigators believe this murder was planned down to the smallest detail? This is A Man Behind the Mask, the case of Vince Marinello.
August 31st, 2006, a parking lot in Metairie, Louisiana. The New Orleans area was still grappling with the dislocation caused by Hurricane Katrina, but beneath the city's surface-level resilience lay older, quieter hazards. Mary Elizabeth Marinello walked out of the Metairie Towers office building at 3:56 p.m. She had just finished a therapy session. As she reached her vehicle, a man stepped into her personal space. He drew a .38 caliber revolver and fired 2 shots into her face. Violent crime had spiked in the suburbs as residents migrated back to the city. Investigators initially suspected a street robbery gone wrong in a neighborhood still physically and socially dislocated by the storm. But her keys and credit cards remained untouched inside her purse. The precision of the close-range shots suggested a targeted execution, carried out with calm deliberation in broad daylight. The victim's husband was Vince Marinello, a veteran sportscaster and radio host. He was a familiar voice of New Orleans resilience, broadcasting talk shows that addressed the city's long road to recovery. Behind that public image, his private life was deteriorating. Police records and personal correspondence detailed a history of intense jealousy and physical altercations that had pushed the marriage to its breaking point. In July, Liz discovered that Vince was still legally married to his previous wife when they wed. She immediately filed for an annulment on the grounds of bigamy. The impending legal battle threatened his social standing and his financial stability. A contentious annulment stood to expose the broadcaster to professional and personal ruin. Witnesses near the parking lot reported a scruffy, bearded man in a heavy flannel shirt. He appeared conspicuously overdressed for the humid August heat of New Orleans, and he fled the scene on a bicycle. Inside Vince's FEMA trailer, deputies found his handwritten list. It included explicit logistical notes, the word mustache, and instructions to paint a bike. Detectives matched these notes to retail records. Days before the shooting, Vince purchased a fake beard and mustache at a theatrical supply shop. Every item on the page moved from a handwritten bullet point into a recorded real-world action. The document tracked the preparation and the escape with chronological precision. Another line read, "Gun, river on way to Mama." Annette Daniels, whom Vince called Mama, lived in Mississippi, requiring a drive over several bodies of water. Ballistics experts identified the projectiles recovered from the victim as rare, nylon-coated .38 caliber bullets. Unlike standard ammunition, these rounds were sold at only one gun shop in the region. Store receipts confirmed Vince had purchased a box of those exact nylon-coated rounds in the weeks preceding the crime. Vince claimed to have left New Orleans between 3:15 and 3:30 p.m. that afternoon, asserting he was halfway to Mississippi during the shooting. AT&T network records contradicted his timeline. A call placed from his cell phone pinged a tower less than a half mile from the crime scene at 1:58 p.m. At 3:57 p.m., his phone was still located well within the New Orleans metropolitan area. Forensic science and digital tracking proved immune to celebrity charm. The data simply traced the physical movements documented in his own handwriting. During his trial, Vince took the stand to claim the document was an evidence checklist he created after the murder to help his own investigation. The state pointed out that the list contained specific details that had not been released to the media at the time it was written. Addressing the court during sentencing, Liz's previous husband, Peter Careersell, spoke on behalf of their daughter. He characterized the defendant as a liar and a murderer, whose lack of remorse was appalling. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes before returning a unanimous guilty verdict. The court imposed a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The suits and broadcast microphones were replaced by institutional gray. Vince Marinello was processed into the state penitentiary, his social capital entirely stripped away. The legal process concluded by exposing the reality behind the public facade, leaving only a condemned man to face the consequences of his preparation. The notoriety of the offender eventually gives way to a quieter, permanent reality for the family and the patients who relied on her care. Her life was dedicated to the preservation of others. As a respiratory therapist, she worked to help the most vulnerable patients breathe, a role defined by competence and compassion. Her name was Mary Elizabeth Norman Caruso Marinello. She was 45 years old. She saved children's lives for a living. The true weight of the tragedy is the loss of a woman who spent her life healing, a void that the finality of the justice system can describe, but never fill.